Hi everyone, welcome to our channel, Rebecca, Stu and the Crew. I'm Rebecca, and today we have a really fun Dollar Tree DIY. We have 3 different projects to make, so let's go over the supplies first. So for the first one, we'll be making this bunny. We'll need the sign, some cardstock clustered with berries from Hobby Lobby. I'm also going to use just some regular white paper, a pencil, and some greenery. Then we're going to need some flowers of your choice, also some adhesive pearl wrap, which is optional, one of these miniature Easter egg ornaments, a paintbrush, some scissors. We'll need some Mod Podge, and then we're also going to use some vinyl, or you could use stickers, and that's completely optional. So let's get crafty. The first thing we're going to do is take our Dollar Tree wood bunny sign, and we're going to trace around the foot on a piece of paper, and just flip it over and lay it right back on top to help you draw the other side of the foot. This is going to become our stencil. And all we're going to do is just draw the large circle for the heel of the foot or the pad of the foot. And then we're also going to draw some circles around where the toes are at. And we'll draw 3 ovals. And then we'll quickly just cut the shape of the foot out. It really doesn't matter if you cut the foot out. You could just cut out the circles, but I'm going to do both just to make it a little bit easier. So now I'm going to just poke a hole through the center of the circle and cut out the little toes there and then the pad of the foot. And you only need to do 1 foot, as you'll see here in just a second. Once you have all the holes cut out, one way makes the right foot, and then when you flip the foot over upside down, it'll make the left foot. And we're just using this as a stencil to draw the balls of the feet on a different piece of paper. Now taking the bunny ear, we're going to trace around it, kind of like at a diagonal on the paper so it will fit. And then we're just making these 2 large oval shapes that are connected. And then what we'll do is these will end up being a bow. So we're just going to cut these out, making sure that they're connected just by drawing kind of an arc between each of the ovals. And again, this is a stencil for the bow. Now we're going to start tracing our shapes onto our cardstock with the flowers. And we'll cut the bow out first. And I'll show you guys how to make that in just a second. And then we're going to find some really pretty flower shapes. I kind of just went all around the cardstock, finding the prettiest pieces to cut out. I had more of the floral design on my finished product. So that's why I made the foot stencil instead of just trying to cut the circles out of the cardstock from the beginning. So now we're just going to take another piece of cardstock. I took this light purple, and I'm just going to take about a 1/2 inch and make a long strip, and that's just going to be the center of our bow. I'm also going to take the adhesive pearl wrap, which again is optional, and all you're going to do is just cut a small piece of that as well to go over the top portion of the center of the bow that we're going to make. So now we'll start putting it all together. So first we're going to take the little pads for the feet and put a tiny bit of Mod Podge on the paper, and then put that onto the sign, and then very lightly brush a thin layer of the Mod Podge over top just to make sure that it stays down. You don't want to oversaturate it because it's going to make it wrinkle, but it's pretty thick cardstock, so I didn't think it was all, you don't have to be super delicate with it. It really depends on what the thickness of the paper is, how much Mod Podge you want to put on. You kind of learn that over time as you craft. So once we've got the first foot done, we're just going to do the same technique to do the other foot. And then once that's done, we'll start working on putting our bow together. And I kind of mixed up the toes. I had them all kind of like a different size. You might want to make sure you lay them in order when you cut them out. I kind of didn't really pay close of attention, which is why I'm rearranging them. So now we have all the pads of the feet and the toes on. We'll start making our bow. We're just going to flip it upside down and put a small line of hot glue down the center of the bow. And then we'll just take the end and flip it towards the center and press it down into the glue, and then do the same with the opposite side. A very simple paper bow. And now we'll take that light pink or purple paper, and we're going to wrap this around the center of the bow. Again, you're going to want a little bit of hot glue, and then you'll wrap it around the front. And then as you wrap it around the back and glue it closed, you'll want to trim off the excess paper. And just glue it down. And then we have that adhesive pearl wrap, which I thought would help dress this up just a tad. So I'm going to apply that to the middle of the bow as well. And then you'll be able to see that pink paper through the adhesive, which makes it really pretty. And now we can glue that right to our bunny. I chose to do the bow right between the ears. You could also make it a bow tie if you like. And now we'll start working on the belly. So I have one of these ornament Easter eggs. They come, I believe it's 6 to a pack, maybe 8 this year. I don't remember. And what you're going to do is just trace around it like you did before. But you can do it right on the scrapbook paper just because it's just an oval. Just find a place that you like and then trace it with the pencil. And then, you know, it's obviously going to be a little bit bigger since you traced around the outside of it. So once you cut it out, just go around it and trim off the excess paper. And then if it's still a little bit too large, once you use the Mod Podge to attach it, you can sand off the edges or trim it again with your scissors. So we're just going to apply the Mod Podge directly to the wood instead of the paper this time. And then I laid the paper on top, and then I did a really thin layer of Mod Podge on top and around the edges of the egg. Then we'll let this dry for just a little while. Now, the next part is going to be optional. I wrote out the words Happy Easter on my Cricut with the Dollar Tree vinyl, and I applied that to the center of the egg. You could use a paint marker, you could use a chalk marker, you could use stickers, or just leave it with just the scrapbook paper. You don't have to put anything on it. It was just an added piece to the design that I came up with. And then we'll hot glue this to the center of the bunny to make his belly. Once we have it centered, then I'll push it down in place and make sure it's on there really well. And then I wanted to dress this up just a little bit more, so I had some ferns. So I cut a few pieces off of it, and I decided to glue them over at the side where that flower was coming off of the belly there, and then attach another little white flower on top just to give it kind of like a 3D effect. And then I'll take one more small piece of a fern, and I'm going to glue that down to the right side, kind of at the bottom, and then add one more little white flower. So it's very simple, super easy to do. Anybody could do this craft, I guarantee it. Here's the bow up close, the bottom with the feet and the eggs, and then there is the whole thing finished. Now let's go over number 2. So we're going to make this vintage bunny with some burlap carrots. The supplies that we'll need for this project, and this is our second one, will be a pool noodle. We're also going to need one of their vintage bunnies, some flowers. We're also going to use a bucket or a basket, some tulle of your choice, and a pair of socks. We'll also need some ribbon. You're going to need these treat bags from Dollar Tree. You get 2 for $1.25, some hot glue, and then we'll need some scissors and a razor blade. Now let's get crafty. So the first thing we're going to do is make the carrots, which is super simple. We're going to lay the pool noodle on top of the carrot and measure about how long we'll need it. I marked it with a marker, and then we'll just go around the pool noodle with the razor blade. You're going to cut that portion off, and then we're going to take our marker and we're going to mark about 2 inches, maybe about 1.5 inches, around that, all the way around the pool noodle here. So my goal was to kind of make this angled so it fits better down into the bottom of the bag, and then we'll draw a little line here so we don't go too far in, and just to help us use it as a guide. So I'm just going to keep going around this with the razor blade and then around the outside portion to basically shave part of this off. It doesn't have to be super smooth. It doesn't have to look pretty. You just need to thin it out. So you could use scissors here. You could use an X-Acto knife. It's really up to you. Just be careful you don't cut yourself as it's sliding through the pool noodle. So I just keep working my way all the way around until I get the bottom portion thinned out a little bit. Now I could have used like polyfill or something to fill up the treat sacks, and that would work, but I wanted to leave the bag a little bit less full. I wanted to have the lines in it with like the kind of bagginess with the pleats. I just thought it looked really pretty like that. I played around with a few different ways that I could fill the carrots, and I just thought this was the best option and made it look the best when it was finished. So once you have it shaved down, you'll just stick it down into the treat bag. And as you can see, it fits almost all the way down into that peak at the bottom. And then it already comes with these great ties attached to it. So you're just going to pull the bag tight and tie these into a bow. Now I do end up adding an extra bow to the top here just because I wanted some of the green ribbon to hang down, and I didn't want to cut the strings that tied the bag closed. So I just used the same color ribbon that I had on hand to add some extra bows and just a little bit more decoration to the carrots. But as you can see, as I tie up the bag here, those pleats that are kind of down the side of it, I just thought it looked really pretty and made it look a little bit more like a real carrot instead of like the perfect stuffed, poly-filled carrot. I just like the way it looked a lot. So I got all 4 of them done. And then again, like I said, I took some green ribbon that I just had on hand and I made just a very simple bow and added that to the top. So I'd had a little bit more ribbon that hung down over the front of the carrot. So now we'll work on the basket. I'm going to take 3 pieces of tulle and bunch them together. And then I'm just going to tie it in a knot. And then I ended up taping it to the table to hold it in place. Now I'm going to do a braid, and this will be to add to the, to go around the basket. If you don't know how to braid, that's okay. You can just twist it. It would look just as pretty. It was basically just to add it, to make it a little bit thicker and help it to show up on the basket because it's white. And I didn't want to keep wrapping it around the basket. It just was becoming problematic. So I thought braiding it would be a little bit easier to help keep it in place and to keep better control over the tulle when I add it to the basket. So I just braid it, and as I go down, I loosen it up a little bit if it starts to get too tight. And then I just go about as far as I think I'm going to need to wrap all the way around the basket. I didn't measure it. I just braided it until I thought I had a long enough piece. So then taking our basket from Dollar Tree, we're just going to add a little bit of hot glue right to the center. And then we'll take the piece with the knot and we're just going to go ahead and glue that portion on. And we'll hold that in place until it sticks, and then just keep wrapping the tulle all the way around the basket, adding a few dots of hot glue as you go around. Now, when I get to the beginning where I first started, I do have way too much. It's probably about 6 inches too long. And so what I did was I glued it in place, and then I cut a few inches off. That way I could tie it and make it look like the other side and leave a little bit of the tulle open and loose so that it would be able to be seen past the flower. So my battery died, so I didn't realize that I didn't get that part of the video. So now I just have this really pretty bow. It's a birthday bow from the Dollar Tree party section. I'm just going to glue that to the center. As you can see, I've got the tulle cut down and opened up on both sides of the basket in the bow. So here's what the basket looks like finished. I do have the carrots in it already, and then I'll show you guys how to put everything together here in just a second. Now we're going to make the bunny. So we're going to take just a plain sock. I have this brown sock left over from a craft I did at Christmas time. I love these rotary cutters from Dollar Tree. They work so amazingly well. As you can see, it cut right through that sock, no problem at all. And all we're going to do is take the top cuff of the sock and we're going to pull it all the way up underneath of the bunny's chin. We're going to make sure that the arms are facing down. So just fix those underneath. That will be a big help if you have them facing down. And then I pulled the sock all the way down to the bottom to make sure I had it long enough before I cut it actually. Then I cut these 2 small holes in the side, and I mean really small because you don't want to cut it too big because it will stretch because it is a sock. And then you're just going to pop the arms through. So I just feel where the armpit is. That helps me find where the top of the arm is on the outside, and then cut a very tiny hole in that sock, and we'll pop the second arm through. And that's all you have to do for this dress, for this bunny. And then you just pull the sock all the way down. We pre-measured it, so I knew it would be long enough. And then I can tuck that bottom portion under to make a nice hem. So you do want to make sure that it's long enough before you cut it with the rotary cutter. And now that I have it all tucked under with a nice hem, I just lift up the sock, add some hot glue underneath, and then attach the sock all the way around just to make sure that it's going to stay down and not ride up if it's moved around anywhere. I just thought that would be a little bit more helpful. You really don't have to glue it down at the bottom. It's really an optional part of it. I just wanted to make sure that the dress would stay down over time. And I plan to use this a few years in a row for a decoration. So that's why I wanted to make sure it was all glued down and everything would stay in place. So as you can see, this is really easy to make an outfit for the bunny. And you could have made this into like a t-shirt or a sweater just by making it shorter. So it's really optional if you want to do a dress or like a sweater, just whatever you choose. And then we're going to dress this up just a little bit. I have this really pretty ribbon from Dollar Tree I got a few months back, and I'm going to attach it right to the center to make like a waistline. And we're just attaching it with hot glue, and then I continue to wrap the ribbon all the way around, and I just keep adding hot glue, and I cut off any excess ribbon that I don't need. So now I just make a very simple bow with the same ribbon that I had used for the waistline. And then we will just glue this to the very front of the dress. It's very, very simple. No sewing required. And then I made 2 bows, 2 different sizes with the same ribbon. And I glue it to the top to make like a hair bow at the top. And I just layer it. So I put the larger bow at the bottom. And then I'll put the smaller bow on top. Then I wasn't 100% thrilled with the ears, both straight up in the air like that. So I decided to bend one of the ears by adding some hot glue and just bending it over and holding it in place until the glue dried. And here's what the bow looks like in the ears. Now we're going to add just a tiny little additional feature to the dress. I just wanted to dress it up a little bit more. I thought it was so cute. So I had these little bows left from Dollar Tree from quite a while ago. And then I just glued that to the dress and added this tiny little pearl to the center of the flower, just to dress her up a little bit more for Easter. And of course, that's optional. I was just trying to dress it up a little bit to show you how cute we can make these, even though there's no sewing required at all. So there's the basket, there's our carrots, and there is our bunny. I just love this, how it turned out. It was so easy. Each part took about 10 minutes in total. So I want to say this whole craft took me about 30 minutes from start to finish. Very, very simple and easy to do and inexpensive. So now we'll get into craft number 3. We're going to be making this project here. So let's go over our supplies. We'll need the large chick sign. We're going to use this Easter garland. They're the bunnies. I'm going to use 2 of those, 1 of these wood planks, and 1 of these Jenga blocks. I'm also going to use a few different colors of paint, a Dollar Tree paint marker, a dotting tool, which is their embossing tool, a paintbrush, a piece of a bath sponge, also some greenery. And then I'm going to need some hot glue, a pencil, and some scissors. So let's get crafty making project 3. So the first thing we're going to do is take the garland and we're just going to pull those staples and the twine off of the back, and we'll need 2 of the bunnies. And we're going to use them just as they are. I'm not going to do anything else to the bunnies, but I am going to put them at the bottom of the chick and trace around them. And I make sure their ears are touching and all the way to the bottom of the chick's feet. So now I'm going to take my pencil and draw just a basic hill. And then I took my Mod Podge bottle and I'm going to trace around it to make a nice circle, and this will be the sun. The next part is just drawing a few sun rays just so I can have something to follow along to when I paint. Then I take the beak and I turn that into a cloud. I add another cloud at the side where the sun's at, and then up where the little tuft of hair would be on the chick, I draw another cloud. And then to make it look like it has some distance, I draw a small cloud down by the neck and another one over by the back. Then I'm going to draw a large cross in the center and 2 smaller crosses on either side. And now we can start painting it. We'll add some extra details as we go along. So this is very simple. I know it looks like it might be difficult to do, but it's a very simple drawing and a very simple way to paint. So we're just going to take the bath sponge, cut a small piece off, and we're going to dip it in the paint and just brush it on around where the bunnies are and where the hill is at. Now, I didn't want to oversaturate the sign with paint. I like that wood grain look that they came out with this year. And so I wanted to be able to see it through the paint, which is why I'm being very, very minimal with how much paint I'm adding here. You can still see a little bit of the white even through the paint. And that's the way it's intentional. I wanted it to be that way. If you want to add more paint, that's really up to you. Like I said, that was completely intentional. Now we'll take some light blue paint and we're going to paint the whole top portion of this blue. I just didn't go over like where the sun was at. I tried not to go completely over where the clouds are, but if I did, I really didn't worry about it all that much because we were going to paint over it anyways. And like I said, I was using a very small amount of paint, so it wasn't super dark and I wasn't worrying about having to cover over it with another color. So we're just going to keep brushing this blue paint on until we have it lightly covered on the whole top portion. And the reason I didn't really do where the bunnies are going to be at the bottoms, I didn't want to over paint it and have to wait a long time for like drying or anything like that, so I could just glue them on quickly. So now we have the top portion and the bottom portion painted. I let them dry for just a minute or two. Then I take a paintbrush and I just draw some sun rays in pink. And I just lightly brush it down. And I actually have this pink paint watered down just a little bit by dipping my paintbrush in water before I dip it into the paint. Then I take that sponge that has the blue paint on it and I just dab very lightly over top of the pink paint so that it kind of blends in a little bit of blue. I just wanted it to have a little hint of like a color of the pink. And I add a little bit of yellow also later on that you'll see, just to have some very basic small sun rays without having like a very bright, stark color, if that makes sense. Then I just keep going over it with pink, just very lightly. It's watered down and just adding a little bit at a time until I have it the way I like it. Again, I dab it with the sponge. And each time it just gets a tad bit darker with the pink and less of the blue. And now that that's blended in, I'm going to let that dry. And while it's drying, I've decided to go ahead and glue on the bunnies. And I just attach those with hot glue and I can still see the lines that I drew with the pencil. So it's really easy to line them up and get them in the right spot. I really like the way these bunnies look. I thought it would be really cute. It makes them look like they're looking up to the front of the hill. So now we'll take a really light yellow paint. We're just going to go over the sun. And again, I just wanted a really light coat of paint. And I did go over the pencil marks a few times just to make sure I couldn't see the pencil mark. So once I have that done, I just use a pretty, almost like a completely dry brush at this point. And I'm just dragging a little bit of that paint from the sun down into the pink sun rays that we've painted earlier. So I just keep dragging that paint down, even in the blue portions there between the pink, I drag a little bit of the yellow down. And then I did the same all the way around the sun with the really light yellow paint. I even dipped it in just a tad bit of white. It's basically almost a completely dry brush at this point, and I just lightly brush out some sun rays that come off from the sides of the sun. So here's a close-up view so you guys could see how the sun rays come off of the sun at the top. Now we're going to just add some white paint and start painting the clouds. Now this first cloud, I added a little bit too much paint, but that's okay because I actually kept going back to it and picking up a little bit of paint when I needed more to paint the other clouds. So this cloud and the second one, I used almost all of the paint from that first cloud that I painted. I only had to pick up more paint for the last cloud that I painted. I wanted it really thin, and again, I wanted to see that wood grain through the paint. I'm just making little swirly marks kind of to make it look like a cloud. And now I take my paint marker and I'm just going to trace over the pencil drawings of the crosses. And you do want to make sure that your paint underneath is dry before you use the paint markers, because if it picks up any of that wet paint underneath, it really messes up the tip of the paint marker and then they don't work really well. So make sure it's completely dry underneath before you go over top of it with your paint marker. Now taking one of those embossing tools or stylus tools from the Dollar Tree, I dipped it in some yellow paint. I just trace around the edge of the sun and some brighter yellow paint, just to add a little bit of a highlight. And then I take a very small amount of pink and yellow paint and add a little bit of color to the clouds to make it look like the color of the sun rays is being reflected into the clouds since they're so close to the sun. Then I use the dotting tool again, just as a fine line, to add some more green paint. I'm actually using a little bit darker green paint to do the top of the hill and add a little bit of shadow. And I add the shadow of where the crosses would be. So since the sun is up to the left, you would have the shadow down to the right. So I just do a very light little cross on the green. And then if it got a little too heavy, I just dabbed over it with my finger to pick up some extra paint off of the wood. So now we have our shadow. And the next part we do is just adding some little tiny flowers. So I'm using that embossing tool again. I just dip it in the paint and add 4 little dots to make a flower. And then I add a little dot to the center with a different color. And then I add some green to the sides to look like leaves on the sides of the flowers. And you can do this part or you don't have to. It's really up to you. And I just kind of add flowers where I think flowers would look pretty. There's really no rhyme or reason to where they go. I just kind of put them all around. So then I start putting a few more flowers and some little white dots up at the top here just to make it look like almost like dandelions at the top, and some little white flowers or clovers. I add a few white dots around the yellow and pink flowers. And then I also go in with some green paint and add some little grass marks. And this is the darker green paint. Then I take the fine brush and I just do some little grass marks up at the top of the hill as well. Some of them actually look like little trees in the distance. So I really like the way that it looked in the back, even though you can't see it that much on the painting here. When they're up close, you actually can really see how they look like little trees. Some more little grass marks. And I did end up adding a little bit of shadow to each side of the bunny with some dark green paint. Now I'm taking some purple paint and I'm going to draw the sash over the cross in the middle. It's just like a half circle and then 2 lines on either side. So it's really easy to do. So once I have the darker purple, I went in with a lighter purple, which is kind of hard to see because this is a very small detail to the picture. But I did add a few little lines of light purple paint just to add some detail to the sash. That way it looked like it had folds in the cloth. I apologize, it didn't show up as well on the camera. I just add a little bit of light purple. And then I decided to add a few purple flowers at the bottom. And a few more white centers and a few more white flowers. Then I add some greenery to either side of the bunny. I got these eucalyptus leaves at the Dollar Tree. So I glue these to each side, and then we're going to make a stand. So the stand is very simple. So we'll just put the greenery on. We'll allow that to dry, and while it's drying, I worked on the stand. So for the stand, I just took one of those wood planks and I painted it green. And then I used the Jenga block and glued that to the back. As you can see here, it's pretty self-explanatory, so I didn't think I needed to show all of the steps. And then we're just going to glue it to the back of the chick's feet, and that will help hold it up and create this really cute stand so it can go anywhere. I just glue it to the back and I hold it together until it dries to make sure that it's going to stand up straight and in place. And I did paint the back of my sign because I like to be able to put them wherever I want and have them look finished. And this is the complete project. Our bunny and our bunny with the burlap carrots. 3 easy projects that anyone can make. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And here's some other videos from our channel you might also enjoy. Have a great night, everyone.